We'll say your heads or tails. Does that make sense? Welcome everyone to tonight's District Attorney Candidate Forum. My name is the Reverend Dr. Bart Rausch. I'm from Madison Square Presbyterian Church, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. We're being hosted tonight at the Living Church at Woodlawn Point, a non-denominational progressive Christian church. Thank you to the Reverend Joseph Garrett and all the staff at Living Church for their kind assistance over the last few weeks. Thanks also to all of the community organizations who have come together to cultivate, elevate, and amplify tonight's important discussion on criminal justice in Bexar County. Throughout the program, you will hear from them as they ask questions of our Democratic candidates in the March 6th primary election. There will be representatives from Big Homie Street Mentoring, Texas 23 Indivisible, Last Chance Ministries, Familia Vota, Move San Antonio, Pro-Immigrant Coalition, and Texas Freedom Network. Thanks to the Fair Punishment Project for their nonpartisan policy and legal research and preparation for tonight's discussion. Thanks to Nowcast San Antonio for joining us this evening and live streaming this special event for our entire city to see. This program was made possible by generous community contributions, ACLU Texas and Move San Antonio. And finally, thank you to Democratic primary candidates, District Attorney Nico LaHood and candidate Joe Gonzales for being part of this important community conversation. February is National Bailout Month, a time dedicated to supporting incarcerated individuals and families of incarcerated men and women who cannot be released from jail due to their inability to financially pay for bail. Community groups throughout San Antonio are working together to pay bail fees throughout February. If you are here this evening and have a loved one in the Bexar County Jail and want to inquire about this program, please go upstairs after the program and visit with one of the volunteers. Let me go over a few of our format rules for this evening. We've flipped a coin to see who will deliver the first opening statement and answer the initial question, which is Mr. Gonzales. We'll alternate who answers each question after the initial question. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement. Representatives from one of our community groups will ask one question, and then each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question. There will be no rebuttal time. I will ask potentially 1 or 2 follow-up questions, and again, there will be no rebuttal time. Stationed in the front row will be our timekeepers. To keep time visually for us, you will get a 30-second warning, which will be 1 hand up, and then 2 hands up will mean stop. After the questions, we will have 10 minutes allocated for a rapid response, yes and no questions, and then some audience questions. And we'll end with closing statements if we have time. And now would you please welcome Joe Gonzales and Nico LaHood, please. Mr. Gonzales, you won the coin toss, and so you are free to give your opening statement.
Very good. Bienvenidos y buenas noches. Es un placer y un honor estar aquí con todos ustedes. Primeramente, les quisiera agradecer a los grupos que organizaron este evento. Good evening, and thank you for coming out to hear us out. The first thing I would like to do is to thank those groups that organized this event. This is very important for you all in the community to hear us out and to be able to tell the differences between the two candidates. I want to start by telling you that I know, because I grew up in San Antonio, I have lived here 55 out of my 58 years in this city, so I know this is a working class community. I too come from a working class family. As a matter of fact, I come from a single parent family. My mother raised 5 of us. My sister is here tonight. She raised us and taught us hard work and values were important. When we were growing up, she struggled to make ends meet for us. I know what it's like to be part of a lunch school program. I know what it's like to not be able to make ends meet. So I understand what it's like to struggle. But through it all, I learned perseverance. One of the things that I value about my mother is that she raised us to become honest citizens. And one of the things I remember her saying is, do the right thing even when no one is looking. I wanted to make her proud, and so I put myself through college. I put myself through law school. I started my career not in a fancy law firm, but as a public servant. I spent 8 years as a former prosecutor. I've been blessed to have a successful practice. The reason I'm running, folks, is I want to give back to the community. I want to come back to the DA's office because I want to continue to be a public servant. I want to make this community safer for you and for me. And with your help, we can do that. Thank you very much for your time.
I will ask you to refrain from applause so we have enough time for questions as well. Sorry, I should have said that beforehand. Mr. LaHood, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
You'll have to excuse me if I seem a little distracted. My uncle, my pop's brother, my Uncle George, is in critical condition in the hospital. And so I still wanted to show up because I gave my word that I would show up. And so I'm here. But unfortunately, I will not stay for the whole debate. You know, obviously, Joe and I have debated twice, and I think we have one more, I believe. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this. I wanted us to at least show up and stay as long as I can. I'm born and raised here. My pop grew up on the west side on Morales Street. My mom went to Harlandale. I spent a lot of time with my grandma on the south side at Clutter and South Florida Street. I'm homegrown, and I have some very unique experiences that I was criticized on when I ran first time. When I ran against our predecessor that it was here for 16 years and nobody wanted to face her, we all agreed there needed to be a different culture in the office. I stepped up when nobody else wanted to step up. No disrespect to Joe, he didn't step up. My Republican opponent didn't step up, but I stepped up. And it didn't work out the first time. But then I stepped up again because we really needed something different. And so we did that. And so with your help, believe it or not, with everyone in this room's help at one point in a campaign, we made a difference. And I'm proud of the work that we have done in the office. I say we, I mean, I'm really moved and touched that there's so many prosecutors on those back rows, those 4 rows, that have really accepted the culture of true justice. Our oath is to ensure justice is done. What does that mean? Did we get it right? We work for a lady that wears a blindfold. She doesn't look at political persuasion. She doesn't look at gender, race, anything else. She looks at the law and the facts and does the right thing no matter what. My own experiences give me very unique perspective on the justice system. Everyone knows, and I was criticized for it, that I was arrested for selling drugs when I was young and stupid. I was labeled everything you can think of. But I turned my life around, I changed my life around, and I understand redemption, and I know what it takes. 2 years later, my brother was murdered on August 15th, 1996, in my parents' driveway. I know what it's like to mop blood off your driveway and load your brother's body on a gurney and hear your mom cry the way only a mom can cry. So I bring those experiences to the office, and I also bring a toughness. Is it my time or 30 seconds?
No, that was time.
That was my time? I missed the 30 seconds. I'm looking forward to answering as many questions as I can. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll go ahead and get started with the questions. We'll talk about equal access to justice. Money continues to be a barrier to justice throughout Bexar County. The use of money bail keeps poor people in jail simply because they cannot afford to buy their release, while mandatory fines and fees mean that poor people cannot access diversion and deferred adjudication. Our next district attorney must make justice equally available to rich and poor alike.
Good evening. My name is Steph Martinez, and I am a student organizer with the Texas Freedom Network and Texas Rising. We are a statewide nonprofit that organizes students on their campuses around LGBTQ equality, reproductive justice, voting rights, and criminal justice. My question tonight is, will you support the complete abolition of money bail? Why or why not? If not, will you commit to immediately opposing money bonds in all misdemeanor cases, in all non-violent felony cases?
Well, first of all, Steph, thank you for coming out here, and thank you for being part of the process. Given that you're so young, you're already on the right track, and I applaud you for that. And I do have an answer for that, but I will tell you that before I go there, that what I believe is you don't get to keep your job just because you take somebody out. Donald Trump is going to learn that the hard way. And so the reason I'm running is because I think that we need a change. And one of the things that that is one of my platform issues is reforming the bail bond system. And because I believe that a person should not languish in jail, should not sit in jail waiting for a court date because he cannot afford to bond out. And I am committed to doing something about it, because I believe that the district attorney's office can do that. There's a lot that prosecutors can do to agree to what are called PR bonds, personal recognizance bonds, for nonviolent offenders, first-time offenders. So I absolutely will commit to doing that. As far as total abolition of money bail, or cash bail as it's called, I believe that that's a good idea in theory, and obviously that's something that we have to see a work in progress. But I do support it. I do think that you ought not to make a difference between the rich and the poor. If you got two different people, one is charged with murder, or rather they're both charged with murder, but one of them can get out on bond because he's got the money to get out, and the other individual is poor, he languishes in jail. That's not right. It shouldn't be about whether or not you can get out of jail because you've got the funds to do it. I would definitely let's agree to get these people out as long as they're not a danger to the community, right? That's the most important thing. We have to ensure the safety of the community. And if that's taken care of, then certainly we can agree to that.
Thank you. Mr. LaHood.
When you say you're for reform bailing, that's a tagline, and that's fine, but what are you going to do? What's broken about the system? I was a magistrate for 2 years, and I will tell you this. I look at the statistics. There's 4,200 people in jail. The Violent Crimes Task Force, which is a joint task force between the DA's office, SAPD, Bexar County Sheriff's Office, DPS, some federal agents, working together, made 5,500 arrests last year for violent offenders. We had a decrease in homicides by 16%. We had a decrease in assault, aggravated assaults, robbery. Part 1 offenses under the Uniform Crime Report went down from 2016 to 17. That's something that's because people are working together. There is nobody languishing in jail for a low-level nonviolent offense. They're just not. I mean, the statistics just do not say that. So you can't say that people are languishing in jail. You have to bring specifics. That's just not accurate. And I don't know if he just doesn't know or he's intentionally saying that, but it's not there. Everybody that's in jail either has a blue warrant, has a felony bond, has conditions of bond, a violation of a bond, a motion to revoke, something significant. I assure you, no one is just sitting in jail for a low-level misdemeanor nonviolent offense. When I was a magistrate, we were encouraged and really expected by the district court judges that appointed us to give PR bonds. We gave PR bonds for any low-level nonviolent misdemeanor case, whether you qualified on the PR schedule or not, and there's a certain requirement that goes, an evaluation, and even for low-level felony cases, nonviolent felony cases, automatic PR bond. But one of the things you have to consider, is that 30 seconds? Thank you, ma'am. One of the things that you have to consider is availability. The bond is for 2 reasons. It's not punitive. A purpose of a bond is to protect you and to ensure that the citizen accused shows up to court. That's it. It's not punitive in nature. So we do not do that. A magistrate judge at the MAG's office deals with the bond. It's reviewed by a district judge or a court judge. Do we have an opinion? Sure. Can we file a motion to increase bond? If there's a violation of a bond and the victim is being victimized still, then yes, we can, but it's a magistrate issue mainly.
Thank you for your time.
Bexar County's diversion program currently comes with a mandatory application fee and mandatory participation fee. These are currently payable to the district attorney's office and cannot be waived even if a defendant is indigent. Will you commit to making a diversion free for all defendants who are eligible to participate? Why or why not? Mr. LaHood.
Well, first of all, the diversion programs that we started in these last 3 years had never been seen before in Bexar County. My predecessor had a diversion program for 17 to 21-year-olds and for certain offenses. We expanded the misdemeanor diversion program to everybody, to anyone in here, and there's different ages. Some people more seasoned and some people less seasoned, I'll say it that way. But for everybody, it shouldn't just be for 17 to 21-year-olds. And so we expanded that. We expanded pretrial diversion to felony. That never been done in Bexar County before. So, and that was a good thing. Now, is it perfect? Can it be made better? Absolutely. I mean, if anybody tells you they're going to be perfect in office or out of office, you really need to consider what they're saying. So I can tell you that our intent in the office is perfect. Will you sit down with me and talk to me and show me, hey, Nico, can we consider this? Absolutely. And for an indigency, because I did court-appointed cases, my first 24 trials, my first 2 years were all court-appointed cases. Absolutely, we'll consider that and adjust the program as needed to make sure that everybody is treated fairly. It doesn't matter what you have or where you come from. Everybody needs to be treated fairly.
Mr. Gonzales.
Well, the problem is that under Nico's administration, he's talked a good game. He's talked about diversionary programs, but it's taken...
Your microphone, sorry.
Sorry. What I said was, he's talked about diversionary programs, but it's taken him 3 years to get to this point. He's not done anything different than anything significantly different than his predecessor. You know, and this is a program under his administration that is a pay-to-play. In order for someone to qualify to be accepted into the pretrial diversion program, you have to pay an application fee. If people don't even have enough money to make ends meet, if they don't have enough money to go to H-E-B and buy groceries, how are they going to have enough money to pay for his diversionary program application fee? The other thing is that there's a fine attached to that. If you're looking to grant someone diversion and give them an opportunity to divert away from the system, you don't charge them a fee. You don't make them come up with the money in order to be part of the system. So there's a lot that can be done. That's just like his program with cite and release. That law was passed and legislation was approved back in 2007. He's been in office since 2014. He's just now talking about cite and release when he discovered he had an opponent. It's time to do something about it now. It's time to not just talk about it, but actually get moving on it. And that's something I will do when elected to this office.
I want to move on to a question about the criminal justice system and immigration. In the last year, undocumented communities have come under attack because of increasingly vicious federal immigration laws. Our next district attorney must take affirmative steps to protect members of our vulnerable communities.
Good evening. My name is Rosie Obobara. I'm the chair of Texas 23 Indivisibles. We are a grassroots movement that works to fight against the Trump agenda, specifically in Congressional District 23. My question is, 2017 saw an increase in violent crime and hate speech against our vulnerable brothers and sisters, especially in the Muslim community. The district attorney is more than the head prosecutor. He's a role model and more. He's a role model who represents the diverse population of Bexar County, which includes people of all races, religion, and citizenship status. What our DA says in public, on the radio, and in the press has real-life consequences for the residents of Bexar County. What will you do to remain fair and justice towards every resident in Bexar County, free of religious or cultural bias and prejudice? Thank you.
Am I first?
Yes, Mr. Gonzales.
Thank you, Mrs. Abubara, for that question, and I'll tell you that I agree with everything that you said, because I believe that as the elected DA, that person is a top prosecutor in the county, and people do look to him for his leadership. And I believe that it's incumbent upon the elected district attorney to be tolerant of other religions, to be tolerant of other faiths, and to be tolerant of immigrants. my opponent has gone on record as being anti-Muslim and anti-immigration, and even though he doesn't admit to it, he's on record. He has gone on talk radio saying that he's anti-sanctuary cities, and it's hard for him to take that back. You can't have it both ways. And so I absolutely agree with you that you have to be open, you have to be tolerant and not be divisive about that issue, because this is a melting pot. This country is made up, look around the room, it's made up of people that come from different countries and different nationalities. And it's going to continue to do that. And the quicker we accept it and the quicker we embrace our brothers, the better off we're going to be.
It's okay. It's okay. That's okay. Well, first of all, really quick, I mean, the cite and release is not something we're thinking of doing. We're doing it. It's already been done, okay? So, I mean, you can't just make a statement and say and hope it's true. I mean, we're already doing the cite and release, and the pretrial diversion program, Joe, you know this. We talked about this when we were officing together. Has never been done to this level before, and now it's in the felony program. It was never there under Susan, and you know that as well. Number one, I have Muslim friends, I have Hindu friends, I have Buddhist friends, I have agnostic friends, I have Shintoist friends, and there's people that work for us that have different faiths and worldviews, and there's not one example, excuse me? Oh, there's not one example of me treating anybody any differently. The question that was asked for me when we were talking about the Constitution, because if Joe were to be the DA, every DA takes an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, was a question on a scenario about Sharia law versus the Constitution. Every DA, every judge, Republican or Democrat or independent, has to say that they're going to support and defend the Constitution. That's an oath. If you can't take that oath, then you can't be the DA, you can't be a judge, you can't be law enforcement. That's just a fact. That was the context of that. Now, I've had discussions, like I said, there's people in this audience right here that work with us, and I promise you, you won't find they're here. You won't find me treating anybody any differently, and there's not an example of that. You can't just call me names, Joe, and then not have an example. That's like me saying, you're guilty of theft, but then have no evidence of it. You have to bring a manner and means, and if that's the kind of DA he's gonna be, I think that's kind of scary. My brother-in-law is in Mexico. He's been waiting 10 years to get here. My wife's from Mexico. I'm not anti-immigration. I want my brother here. So how can I be in 30 seconds, I can't be anti-immigration. When people ask about sanctuary cities, you have to take it further. What does that mean? Does that mean that you don't want to enforce federal laws? I mean, we have federal laws that have to be enforced. We have to have order. I mean, so I don't understand what sanctuary cities, we have to talk about a definition. I'm for supporting DACA students. I think that's a separate issue than sanctuary cities. I don't think a child should be punished for the behavior of somebody else. That's unfair. That's not justice. And so that's a whole separate issue. So again, I like discussions instead of labeling, and this campaign has turned into name calling, and it's unfortunate.
Before we go to our next, please refrain from applause. Before we go to our next immigration question, I want to follow up on cite and release. Cite and release will only work if law enforcement agrees to ticket instead of arrest defendants eligible for the program. Will you commit to declining charges on any defendant who is arrested instead of ticketed for a Class C misdemeanor to send a strong message to law enforcement that cite and release is to be implemented?
Reverend, with all due respect, may I correct that just a little bit? A Class C misdemeanor, you don't get arrested anyway. So you're talking about for a Class B misdemeanor up. There are things that a DA has authority over and things that DA has influence over. I cannot make the law enforcement community use cite and release. The 2007 law doesn't make law enforcement use cite and release. It's a discretion, it's an option for them. What we did, we wanted to take it further. We did a best practices study of Travis County, Dallas County, Harris County, and counties outside of Texas, because under the current law, you give a summons, that person still gets arrested later because the officer stays on the street, and then the person still ends up in county court. Our program is very unique. The officer gives a summons, the person given the summons shows up at the sheriff's office within 30 days, gets identified, not arrested, you don't get a SID number, you get tracked. We have to track people to make sure they show up to court. They show up to court 3 weeks later, they're given a 90-day program. If they follow the program and do everything appropriately, their case never gets filed. They never have to pay for bond, they never have to pay for an attorney because we're gonna have the public defender there. They never have to pay for an expunction. I mean, this is true justice for everybody. They don't have to pay a high-powered lawyer or get a court appointed. They don't need either one of them. They're gonna be treated fairly, and everybody. Now, if we see trends of law enforcement that are treating people differently, I'm gonna be calling the chief, I'm gonna be calling the sheriff, I'm gonna be working with the 46 other agencies around Bexar County. that we deal with when they eventually get it, 30 seconds, and then we're gonna have a discussion. Because everyone needs to be treated fairly. And if you ask any one of these fine people that work for you in the office, there's not one of them will tell you when no cameras are there, when it's just us, when nobody's around, Joe, when it's just me, God, and the people in front of me, they know that I'm consistent in my behavior. We're not always gonna agree, folks. I mean, if anybody tells you they're gonna agree with you on every topic, they're lying to you. But I promise you I'll always meet. Like with the 15 town hall meetings, never in the history of the United States has a DA done 15 town hall meetings, not taking cards, open mic, and have discussion live feeding. It's never happened before, and I'm doing that.
Well, that would be nice if you were able to conduct those town hall meetings without yelling at people and without intimidating them like you have been, and that's on video. And anybody, all you need to do is look at those videos to show that you're challenging the citizens. That's part of the platform of this race, is your temperament, Nico.
If
you know,
you'll respond to the cite and release question, please.
Okay. And so with regard to cite and release, it's the same issue that I've been running on. What has taken Nico so long? This is 2018. You've been in office since January 2015. It doesn't take 3 years to implement cite and release. You've been sitting on your laurels, you've been sitting on your hands, and now because you realize you have an opponent, now because you realize you might lose your job, you decide to do something about cite and release. That's something that could have and should have been done a long time ago. And I'm sorry that you don't like it, and I'm sorry that your supporters don't like it, but that's the cold reality of it, Nico.
Sir, Reverend, that's just a lie. So if I may respond to that with your permission.
I'm going to go ahead and stick to the no rebuttal.
Okay,
You'll have
well,
another
I mean,
opportunity
that's
to debate.
just not true, so I'll
I want to go ahead.
If you have a black Armada, a Honda Civic, or a Nissan white Armada on that side of the street, the cops are out there, and if you move it now, you won't get a ticket. Thank you.
Yes or no questions, the quick ones, and then what? Sure. Okay, that's fine. All right. All right, go ahead.
Hello.
We have another question.
My name is Rebecca Flores, and I'm with the Pro-Immigrant Coalition. This is a coalition that was formed 4 days after Senate Bill 4 was signed by Governor Abbott. 350 members with 12 organizations. So there was a big, overwhelming support against Senate Bill 4 in the city of San Antonio. My question is this: the old convictions that a person has can have serious immigration consequences, even for low-level offenses. Will you commit to following Harris County's lead and cooperating with efforts to challenge or vacate old convictions by immigrants seeking to avoid deportation?
Mr. Gonzales.
I absolutely.
Microphone, please.
If the question is, will I support efforts against SB 4, the answer is absolutely, because I think that that law enforcement, and by the way, he mentioned earlier that an elected DA has to follow immigration law. It's not the function, it's not the purpose of a state prosecutor to enforce federal law. That's what ICE does. That's what the federal courts do. And that's not something that he should be worried about. And that's what happened. And I'll tell you, called out Sheriff McManus, Chief McManus. I'm here to say Chief McManus did the right thing by releasing those people, because that's not his job. We have to look at whether or not these people that are here and are undocumented have the ability and have the confidence to be able to come out of the shadows and be productive citizens. He says he doesn't know what sanctuary cities is. He doesn't know what the definition of that is. Ask anybody who's fearful of going to court because they think they're going to get deported. Ask any parent who thinks that they're going to lose their right to be in this country or their privilege to be in this country if they step forward. They could tell you what a sanctuary city is. They could tell you that they fear law enforcement officials and government officials and prosecutors who don't support their ability to have a pathway to citizenship, and that's wrong, and I oppose it.
Well, first of all, he didn't answer the question. Ma'am, I think your question was, will the DA support reversing convictions, correct? Yes. Yes, if once we lose jurisdiction and it's out of our plenary powers to a judge, out of our power, we can't control that. That would have to be legislative. So I want to answer your question and not distract everybody by calling me names. I want to answer your question. And so we can't. So that's outside of what a DA can do. So anybody that says they can do that either doesn't know what they're talking about and they shouldn't be the DA, or they're not telling the truth, and that's not a good characteristic being DA. He doesn't know my conversations with Chief McManus. So he just called me a bunch of names, made a lot of allegations with zero evidence. This is the characteristic of the type of DA he's going to be. That is shameful, Joe. That's terrible. I mean, you have no idea. So you didn't answer a question and started calling me names about sanctuary cities, or I'm anti-immigration, or the chief did the right thing. Why did the chief do the right thing? And he has no idea what conversations what I had with Chief McManus. We're working together. Let me tell you, I'm the one that was at the courthouse with Nelson Wolff and Chief McManus saying SB4 is not good. I was there. You can look at any news. I mean, Jasper's here. You can look it up in the Express News or on TV. KSAT had it. They all covered it. I said no. I'm the one that called ICE and our office behind the scenes, not trying to get attention from anybody, and said, don't come to our courthouse and look for illegal immigrants, because our victims are leaving. It happened 3 times, and you're going to hear from me. We already have special status for people that are witnesses or victims. So we try to educate them and let them know, yes ma'am, and try to let them know that we're not here to deport you. That's not our job. Our job is to protect you. And so we're working with defense attorneys, Jorge Aristoteles and many other people, adjusting the pretrial diversion program. I just had a meeting about it a while back to say, look, let's make sure that immigrants aren't punished, that DACA students aren't punished for what their parents did. And we're going to make some adjustments on our pretrial diversion program for them, because it's the right thing to do, not the political thing. And by the way, on cite and release, it takes years, and he has no idea what it took to get that program going. We had to recreate a whole new computer system. And so he's lodging attacks again with no information about what it takes to start a cite and release program. It is a long process, and I started it way before I knew I had any opponents, and it's irrelevant about you or the other opponents.
So we're going to, knowing that you have a family situation you've asked to go, what we're going to do, and what the organizers have asked me to do, is we're going to let you have a 2-minute closing statement. You can exit at that point, and then we'll continue with the questions that were prepared by our organizations for Mr. Gonzales. So, Mr. LaHood, the floor is yours.
I'll sit down. I guess we'll sit down. Folks, there's a saying amongst trial lawyers, and Joe's a trial lawyer, and I said it the other night, Joe. When you have the law on your side, you argue the law. When you have the facts on your side, you argue the facts. When you have neither, you attack opposing counsel. His whole campaign has been attacks, calling me names, trying to label me something that I'm not. That is a scary proposition, using false information like a 62% dismissal rate for domestic violence cases. That is not true. And anyone that wants to show up to any one of our town hall meetings, or the coffee that I'm going to have this weekend, or next week, wherever you want to do, show up with me with no time limits, no disrespect, Reverend, or anything else, and we can have a full discussion. I will talk it out with you, and I will tell you that everything that he's calling me, all the name calling, all the false accusations are false, and it's shameful. This campaign is based off of name calling. It dishonors the office of the DA that belongs to you, and it's based off revenge. That's the bottom line, because there's no substance in the basis of why he's running. If you look at all his commercials, all his mailers, they're all just dishonest and disingenuous sound bites with no substance. And the last two debates, Joe, we've seen that. I've been in this community all my life. I grew up on the south side with my grandma. My pop grew up on the west side. I've had the experiences that I shared with you early on. I was a passionate defense attorney, Joe, for 13 years. All the years that I officed with Joe, not once did he say, man, Nico, if you don't make it, I want to run for DA. It's never been that way. This was a last-minute home, guys. It was a last-minute deal, and it's because of revenge, and you know that, Joe, and you know why. And we won't talk about the murder case, but you know why this is where it is. And I'm happy to talk about this. I'm sorry that I have to leave, folks. I'm sorry. But I gave my word to show up. And you ask anybody that works with me, my word means something. I don't no-show to interviews, because this is an interview to see who you want to fire. He's asking you to fire me and hire him, and then try to beat the Republican in the general election. but he's not giving you any substance to do that besides name calling. I'm here. I've served you honorably, in my humble opinion, for more than 3 years. I thanked you for your support the first time. I look forward to serving you some more, God willing, and with your help. And I promise you, I'll meet with you anytime you want to, and I'll continue this conversation. But please excuse me that I have to leave. My uncle is in very serious condition, but I still wanted to show up. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
We'll move on with our prepared questions. We'll talk about charging and sentencing. People are more than their worst acts, and even people who commit the most serious offenses often change their lives profoundly over time. To recognize the worth and potential for growth in all people, our district attorney's office must strive to implement charging and sentencing policies that take into account the needs, character, and background of each person.
Hello, I'm Jeanette Reyes. Good evening. So I'm with Big Homie and All of Us or None, and we work with at-risk youth to provide violence intervention. And this is created by the Agenda of All of Us or None, which is a national movement formed by formerly incarcerated individuals. We push for policy changes on criminal justice at the local and national level. So my question to you is, drug abuse and addiction is a serious health crisis in our community. Research has consistently shown that incarceration does not address addiction and only exacerbates cycles of poverty. So will you agree to A, offer free diversion to all marijuana possession less than 4 ounces so that people arrested with marijuana are never prosecuted in the first place? And B, never ask for incarceration for possession of less than 1 gram of all other controlled substances?
Reyes, thank you for that question. I think that it is a very important question because I think the root of a lot of the arrests that are drug-related are because people are hooked on drugs. And I think that there's a lot that the DA's office can do to focus on that problem and to alleviate drug addiction. And so I would absolutely commit, number one, to the first question, or A, as you mentioned, and absolutely agree to diversionary programs for misdemeanor, low-level marijuana possessions. There are some states that have already legalized marijuana, and some would argue that's a trend in this country. Texas is not there. It may take years for Texas to be there, but we have to recognize that sometimes marijuana possessions have more to do with drug addictions than they have to do with criminality. So absolutely, I would agree and accept diversionary and offer diversionary programs. And I would do more than that. Nico, and you know, what I'm going to try not to do, I'm going to try not to attack him because he's not there, and it's not fair that he doesn't have a right to defend himself. I'm sorry that he's having that situation, so I'm going to try real hard not to do that, but I will tell you that when he was in trouble, he got deferred adjudication for possession with intent to deliver 200 ecstasy pills. He got diversion. He was able to wipe that off his record. Today, if someone were arrested for that, he could not get the benefit that he got. And that's wrong. You can't kick the ladder out from under you and not offer what you got when you were in that situation. That's one of the things that I would do, is I would ensure that we would expand the diversionary programs to include the less than a gram state jail felony drug cases.
Prosecutors across the country regularly overcharge defendants, bringing multiple charges for a single act or charges that are more serious than the conduct warrants, just to pressure defendants to give up their constitutional rights and plead guilty. Will you adopt a policy to charge the least serious acceptable charge so that the charge more accurately reflects the alleged conduct and does not create artificial incentives for a defendant to plead guilty?
Absolutely. That's part of the problem with the DA's office, is the lack of training. There are prosecutors in that office that have not been adequately trained to review a case and to be able to indict it properly. There's a case where the Fourth Court of Appeals reversed because the entire case ended up being a monumental waste of time. All the prosecutor had to do was to follow the template And you know that in that case, he was not even able to fully name the name of the defendant. Because of that, that person languished in jail for several months. That case was taken up to the Fourth Court of Appeals, and that case was reversed based on the incompetence of Nico's administration because somebody is falling asleep at the wheel. One of the things that I would do in that office is to absolutely ensure that we properly train the prosecutors, that we look for the least restrict, or I should say, the offense that fits the facts and not the most serious offense if it doesn't fit. I've got a case right now in another county where an individual who was 16 years old was charged with manslaughter and was certified to stand trial as an adult. That should not have happened. That would not have happened here in Bexar County under my watch.
I want to move on to juvenile justice. Children's brains continue developing until around the age of 25, and research supports their enhanced capacity for rehabilitation. As a result, children should not be prosecuted in adult court, nor should they be given punishments that preclude the opportunity for redemption. Our district attorney should treat children consistent with neurological development at every stage in the criminal justice system.
Good evening. My name is Ana Sofia Gonzales, and I'm a field intern with Move San Antonio. Move San Antonio is a grassroots, nonpartisan nonprofit building power in underrepresented youth communities through civic education, leadership development, and issue advocacy. Our question is this: will you commit to never seeking transfer to adult court for juveniles 16 and younger? For juveniles who are 16, will you commit to never seeking transfer to adult court unless the charged offense is a capital felony and the juvenile already has a conviction for a prior first-degree or capital felony?
I don't think it's unreasonable to ask a prosecutor not to transfer someone for an offense that's less than capital. It's almost as if I anticipated that question. That's exactly the situation that we have in that other county. Part of the reason I'm running, folks, is I'm coming to this office with job experience. I spent 8 years as a prosecutor. I handled over 100 jury trials as a prosecutor, not 4 like he did before he was elected, but over 100. And I spent time in the juvenile section. I was a chief prosecutor in the juvenile section in Harris County, and I was involved with reviewing whether or not to certify individuals or children, as they're called, for certification. And so absolutely, that's what we would do, is we would focus on only the most serious offenses, only those cases where the only alternative, the only remedy is to certify a juvenile. There is a lot that the juvenile system can do, and there's a lot that the DA's office can do to participate in that, because in the juvenile system, it's about rehabilitating the youthful offender, and certainly that's something that the DA's office should be focusing on.
So would you decline to ask for sentences that are de facto life without parole for any person under the age of 21 at the time of the offense?
I think it would be difficult to commit to that knowing or not knowing the facts of that individual case. It's unfair to expect a prosecutor to commit to saying, I would never ask for basically what you're talking about is a non-death capital case involving someone who's 18 or 19 years old. It's difficult to say, because there are exceptions to every rule. I will tell you that under my administration, it would certainly be an extreme situation where we would be seeking even a non-death capital on an 18 year or 19 years old unless the facts merited that sort of punishment.
Children are less able to make an informed decision when deciding to talk to the police. Will you vocally support a policy that prohibits the interview or interrogation of a child, either as a witness, suspect, complainant, or respondent, by law enforcement without the presence of a parent or guardian?
Well, again, that's one of the differences between my opponent and I. Before he was elected DA, he spent his time representing DWI defendants. He was a DWI lawyer. That's what he did for a living.
I'm going to ask you not to.
And because of that, he didn't have a lot of experience handling complicated cases. Where I have, and that's the difference between he and I. And I absolutely would take every step to ensure that those individuals weren't exposed to those kinds of punishments.
I'm gonna ask the audience to refrain from making comments, please. He's gonna get to answer the way he gets to answer. You can make decisions based on that. It's unfortunate Mr. LaHood can't answer. There will be another debate. But I'm going to ask you to refrain from comment. I'm going to move back to cite and release. Arrest and detention, even if short-term, disrupts families and communities and can lead to job loss and housing insecurity. Cite and release practices can replace disruptive arrests with ticketing for low-level offenses, which allow district attorneys to hold the individual responsible for conduct without risk of the devastating consequence of jail time.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Selene Gomez, and I'm here with Mi Familia Vota. We're a national, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that looks to leverage and increase Latino participation and also advocates for issues such as voting rights and immigration. And this question is due to the possible deportation after this process is done. So the Bexar County's recent cite and release program includes the misdemeanor of driving with an invalid driver's license, but it does not include driving without a license or no license, which would ultimately protect our immigrant communities and foster trust in local and law enforcement. Will you commit to adding driving without a driver's license to the cite and release program?
Absolutely. Those types of offenses are what we call victimless offenses. There's no true victim. So no one has been hurt. There's no reason that we can't agree to cite those individuals and just give them their day in court. So I would absolutely agree to include that sort of an offense with the other programs. Again, it's the issue of what's taken so long. If we were going to do this cite and release, we could have done this a long time ago. We're way behind the times. We need to catch up. We need to have a leader who is going to actually implement it and just not talk about it.
Our final area of programming questions is transparency and accountability. Our district attorney's success depends on building and maintaining with the community he serves. Our next district attorney must increase transparency and accountability by providing the community with information about arrest rates, charging decisions, and sentencing policies. He must also commit to rigorously and independently investigating and prosecuting police and other official misconduct.
Good evening. My name is H. Drew Galloway. I'm the Executive Director of MOVE San Antonio. I'm asking this question on behalf of Last Chance Ministries. For all cases involving police misconduct, including police-involved shootings, violence, corruption, or fraud, will you commit to a full investigation to include presentation before a grand jury?
Again, it is difficult to commit to a conclusion or a plan of action without having all the facts in front of you, but I will tell you that I think that the common sense approach is to fully investigate a case that is brought to the district attorney's office, even one, or I should say especially one, that involves a police officer, because the community is going to be outraged. The community is going to be concerned that the DA's office is going to whitewash that investigation. So I would absolutely encourage my prosecutors to conduct full investigations. And there's a reason we have a grand jury process, folks, because we want the citizens, members of that grand jury, to make the ultimate decisions about whether or not there's sufficient evidence to indict a case. I've said for years, again, remember I spent 8 years doing this before I ever became a defense lawyer. I used to say all the time, I could walk into a grand jury proceeding with a stack of files, tell the grand jury anything I wanted to, and that would direct whether or not a case was going to be true build or no build. I think that there are times when we absolutely need to use that grand jury process the way it was meant to do, and I will commit to doing just that.
Will you commit to maintaining and publishing data quarterly, including the number of misdemeanor and felony cases filed each month, disposition statistics, pretrial incarceration rates, and length of stay by offense category, and average bond for each class of offense, so that the community can determine the effectiveness of policies aimed at reform?
That's not an unreasonable request. Of course, I can commit to doing that. I don't think it would take very much manpower to do that. As a matter of fact, I will tell you that I remember at least one of my former employers required that of us, where after each day we would log in what we did and we would turn in those reports, and then that was published at the end of the month. So that's certainly something that can be done, and it should be done.
And will you make public all internal policies and directives regarding discretionary decision, such as plea bargaining, diversion program eligibility and acceptance, deferred adjudication, and sentencing requests?
Again, I don't think that's anything unreasonable, as long as it didn't do anything to violate the rights of victims, as long as there wasn't any information in those documents that would compromise victims' addresses and phone numbers and jobs. Certainly, I don't think that's anything that's unreasonable, and I certainly would look to try and do that because transparency is important. That's one of the reasons that Nico drew some criticism this year when he banned the Express News during that press conference. And the elected DA has to be transparent, not just because they're complimenting you, but even and especially when they're criticizing you. So absolutely, there's got to be transparency in that office.
I'm going to move to some rapid-fire questions. We have placards under your chair for no or yes, but since it's just you, if you prefer just to say yes or no to these questions, that's fine. Will you commit, yes or no, will you commit to a policy seeking the least severe acceptable punishment in all cases?
Yes.
Yes or no, attorneys appointed to represent indigent defendants make $140 per misdemeanor case, no matter how much work they put in. This payment structure creates disincentives to effective representation. Will you commit to supporting an optional hourly payment schedule for appointed attorneys like the one that's in effect in Dallas County?
Yes.
Yes or no? Each death prosecution costs taxpayers on average $2.3 million. Minorities are more likely to be selected for death prosecutions and more likely to be sentenced to death. Knowing the disparate impact of the death penalty, will you commit to ending this racist and expensive practice and never seek the death penalty? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes or no? Under our current asset forfeiture scheme, the district attorney's office can seize property from people even if they've never been convicted of a crime, which goes directly to the offices of the DA and law enforcement. Will you commit to not prosecuting asset forfeiture cases unless the asset is the direct proceeds of a crime for which the defendant has been convicted?
Yes.
Access to information promotes fairness, congeniality, and the early resolution either through pleas or dismissals of criminal cases. Yes or no? Will you create an open file discovery system to provide information to defense counsel as you receive it, even before indictment?
Yes.
Recognizing that defendants would not be convicted today for marijuana possession, San Francisco just expunged and sealed old convictions for marijuana possession. Yes or no? Would you support a similar initiative in Bexar County?
Yes.
Wrongful convictions have plagued Texas statewide. Advances, and this is in two parts, advances in forensic science and false confession studies have led to thousands of exonerations. Where DNA or other evidence that may lead to exoneration is in your possession, will you commit to always making that evidence available for independent testing should the defense ask to test?
Yes.
I'm sorry, that was just a one-parter. The prosecution of quality of life offenses imposes a poverty penalty while doing nothing to increase community safety. Knowing this, will you commit to not prosecuting prostitution?
Yes.
The opioid epidemic is a public health crisis and shows no signs of abating. Will you commit to adopting an office-wide Good Samaritan policy stating that individuals who call the police in response to a drug overdose will not be prosecuted?
Yes.
Yes or no? Fines and fees disproportionately impact people in poverty, and current sanctions exacerbate the underlying causes of poverty. Will you commit to never ask for driver's license suspensions for non-payment of fines or fees?
Yes.
Yes or no? Will you support the de-escalation of drug penalties for low-level possession from a state jail felony for less than a gram of a narcotic to a Class A misdemeanor?
Yes.
And I believe I have some audience questions that have been turned in. That should be brought to me, no? Okay. So I want to move then to Mr. Gonzales. You have 2 minutes for closing remarks.
Folks, once again, I want to thank you for taking the time out to come and listen to us, listen to the responses to the questions that have been asked, so that hopefully you can glean the difference between my opponent and I. Part of the reason that I'm running is, like some of you, I supported Nico when he ran, but I've been extremely disappointed in his failure to lead that office. I am running because it's time for change. I am running because I believe that I can make a true difference, and it's now time to clean up our streets, and it's time to make our communities safer for you and for me. Another reason that I'm running is you have seen in the paper and in social media that temperament is an issue. And we have to have someone in that office that has the appropriate amount of temperament, that treats the parties in the courts with respect. We're not seeing that today. The DA's office is treating defense lawyers, victims, and witnesses with disrespect. That will not happen under my administration. I also have a vision for bringing true reform to the office. I want to reform the bail system so that people don't languish, and I'm sorry I disagree with Nico, but all he has to do is go to the jail court every week, and he'll see the people that are sitting in jail waiting to just go to court to take a plea bargain because they don't want to sit in jail, they want to go home with their families. I also want to focus on violent crime. So there is a lot that can be done. There is a lot that I will do. With your help and with your vote, let's bring safety back to this community. I ask for your vote March 6th. Thank you.
I want to give a special thanks again to Big Homie Street Mentoring, Texas 23 Indivisible, Last Chance Ministries, Mi Familia Vota, Move San Antonio, Pro-Immigration Coalition, Texas Freedom Network, Nowcast San Antonio, ACLU Texas, Fair Punishment Project, the District Attorney Nico LaHood, and candidate Joe Gonzales. I want to remind you that early voting for the March primary begins Tuesday, February 20th through Friday, March 2nd. Election Day is on Tuesday, March 6th. If you have any questions about voting in Bexar County, please see Move San Antonio this evening, or for those watching at home, visit Bexar.org and click on Elections. This concludes our 2018 District Attorney Forum. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Have a good night.
I'm not talking to you, sir. I'm not talking to you.